Poor single mother warned Billionaire about a secret meeting. What he discovered left him in tears. Have you ever trusted someone so much only to realize they never really saw you? I mean, you gave them your all, your heart, your time, your tears, and still, you were just a shadow in their world. That kind of pain? It cuts deep, y'all. It's like standing in a crowded room screaming and nobody even looks up. That's where this story begins, in a place so heavy it felt like the air was pressing down on me. I was a single mom, fighting every day just to keep my kids fed, to keep a roof over our heads, to keep hope alive when everything inside me was crumbling. Picture me in my little apartment, the kind where the paint peels and the radiator hisses like it's got a grudge. My kids are asleep, and I'm sitting there in the dark, bills piled up on the table, wondering if I'm enough. Wondering if anyone sees me, the real me, not just the maid, the server, the woman who's always fine, even when she's breaking. This story? It's about what happened when I trusted someone with a truth that could have cost me everything. It's about betrayal, but also about hope sneaking in when you least expect it. It's about one moment, one voice that changed everything. What would you do if you had to risk it all just to be heard? If one choice could either save you or break you for good? Y'all, this journey is raw. It's real. It's the kind of story that'll make you feel the ache in your chest, the fire in your soul, and the strength you didn't know you had. So, stick with me. Because what I found out, it left me in tears, and it might just do the same to you. Let me know where you're watching from. Drop your city in the comments. Let's build this community. Type A1 if you love stories like this, stories that speak truth, pain, and resilience. Drop a 0 if you want something different next time, so I can make it better for you. And if this hits your heart, hit that subscribe button for Mr. Alex Stories. Let's walk this path together. Picture this, a small cramped apartment in a noisy part of town. The kind where the walls are so thin you can hear the neighbor's TV blaring through the night, some old game show with laughter that feels like it's mocking you. That's where I was, raising my 2 kids, Jada and Malik, on my own. I'm a single mom, working double shifts at a diner, the kind with sticky floors and coffee that tastes like regret. My hands smelled like grease all the time, and my back ached from carrying trays, but I'd come home, kiss my kids, and pretend everything was okay. Life was heavy, y'all. Bills stacked up like they were racing to bury me. The electricity got cut off twice last year, and I'd sit in the dark, telling Jada stories by candlelight so she wouldn't be scared. Malik, he's only 6, but he'd look at me with those big eyes like he knew we were struggling. I'd smile, but inside, I was drowning. I'd lay awake at night, wondering if I was failing them. Was I enough? Could I give them the life they deserved? Every day felt like a fight just to keep going. Our apartment was on the 3rd floor of this old brick building, where the stairs creaked and the hallway smelled like mildew and dreams that never made it out. The windows barely let in light, always caked with city grime, but I'd hung these cheap dollar store curtains, bright yellow, to make it feel like home. Jada, my 9-year-old, she'd draw pictures, crayon sketches of flowers and suns, and tape them to the fridge, like she was trying to bring some color into our gray world. Malik, bless his heart, he'd follow me around, clutching this little toy truck, asking when we could go to the park. I'd say, soon baby, but soon never came. There was always another shift, another bill, another reason to keep pushing. I worked at the diner from 6 in the morning till 3. Then I'd rush to my second job cleaning rooms at this fancy downtown hotel, the kind of place where people dropped $100 bills like they were nothing, while I was counting pennies to buy milk. At the diner, I'd serve truck drivers and night shift nurses, folks who'd tip me with tired smiles and loose change. I knew their stories, divorces, sick parents, dreams they'd tucked away. We were all just trying to survive, you know? But I'd listen, nod, pour their coffee because their stories made me feel less alone, like we were all carrying something heavy, just in different ways. Still, there were moments that kept me going, like when Jada would read her library books out loud, her voice all serious like she was teaching me something, or when Malik would fall asleep on my lap, his little hand curled around my finger. Those moments? They were my oxygen, but even then, the weight never left. I'd look at my kids and see their daddy's face, his smile, his eyes, and it hurt. He left when Malik was a baby, said he couldn't handle the pressure. I didn't hate him, not really, but I hated how his leaving made me question myself. Was I too much? Not enough? Why couldn't I hold it all together? I'd go to church on Sundays when I wasn't working, sit in the back pew with Jada and Malik, their little heads bobbing to the choir. The preacher would talk about faith moving mountains, and I'd want to believe it. I'd pray for strength, for a break, for something to shift. But Monday always came, and it was back to the grind. Same greasy apron, same aching feet, same stack of bills. I started to wonder if God was listening, or if he saw me the way the world did. Just another face in the crowd, invisible unless someone needed something. There was this one night, I remember it so clear. It was late, maybe 2 a.m, and I was sitting at the kitchen table, the one with the wobbly leg I kept meaning to fix. The kids were asleep, and the apartment was quiet except for the hum of the fridge. I had this envelope from the landlord, a final notice, red ink screaming at me. I just stared at it, my hands shaking, feeling like the walls were closing in. I wanted to cry, but the tears wouldn't come. It was like I was too tired even for that. I kept thinking about my mama, how she raised me on her own too, how she'd always say, "Tanya, you stronger than you know." But that night, I didn't feel strong. I felt like I was disappearing, like the world was swallowing me whole. I'd walk past the mirror sometimes and barely recognize myself. My hair was always pulled back in a messy bun, my eyes tired, my shoulders hunched from carrying it all. But I kept going because Jada and Malik needed me. They were my why, my reason to keep fighting, even when I felt like I was losing. I'd tell myself, "Just one more day, Tanya. You can do one more day." And somehow I did. But deep down I was scared. Scared I'd never be enough. Scared my kids would grow up knowing the same struggle. Scared I'd never climb out of this hole. That's where I was, y'all, just trying to hold on, trying to keep my head above water. I didn't know it then, but something was coming. Something that'd shake me to my core, make me question everything, and show me a truth I wasn't ready for. But that's a story for the next part. Then one day something happened that hit me like a punch to the gut. I worked at this fancy downtown hotel part-time, cleaning rooms for extra cash. It was tough, but I was proud. Every dollar went to my kids. One evening, I'm mopping the conference room floor, the kind with plush carpets and chandeliers that sparkled like they were mocking my life. The air smelled like expensive cologne and power, you know? I was invisible there, just part of the furniture, moving quiet so I wouldn't disturb nobody. But that night, I overheard something that stopped me cold. These suits were in there, big shots with slick hair and watches that cost more than my rent for a year. They didn't even glance my way as I worked, like I wasn't even human. They were huddled in a corner, whispering about a secret meeting set for later that week. I was behind this heavy partition, mopping slow, trying to blend into the shadows. Their voices were low, but I caught every word. They were talking about a deal, a big one, the kind that'd make them millions. But the cost? Shutting down the only clinic in my neighborhood, the one place folks like me could afford to take our kids when they got sick. My heart started racing, y'all. I gripped that mop handle so tight my knuckles ached. They were talking about my community, the place where I grew up, where my kids played, where my neighbors leaned on each other to survive. That clinic wasn't just a building, it was a lifeline. Jada's asthma attacks, Malik's fevers, the time I had that bad cough and couldn't afford a doctor nowhere else. That clinic saved us over and over, and these men with their pressed suits and fancy pens were planning to rip it away like it was nothing. Like we were nothing. All for profit, for some high-rise condos nobody in my neighborhood could ever afford. I stood there, frozen, the mop dripping on the floor, my breath caught in my chest. I felt so small, like the world was this giant machine, and I was just a speck caught in its gears. Who was I to do anything? Just a maid, right? Just Tanya, the woman who scrubbed their floors and emptied their trash. But those words kept echoing in my head. Their cold, casual talk about clearing out the clinic, about how nobody important would care. Nobody important. That's what they thought of us. That's what they thought of my kids, my neighbors, me. I finished my shift that night in a daze, my hands moving on autopilot, folding sheets, wiping mirrors, but my mind was somewhere else. I kept seeing Jada's face, the way she'd wheeze when her asthma flared up, how I'd rush her to the clinic at midnight, praying they'd have the medicine she needed. I thought about Malik, how he'd cling to me when he was burning up with fever, his little body trembling. That clinic was where I took him when he was 2, when I thought I might lose him. And now? These men were going to take it away, like our lives didn't matter. Like we were just numbers on a spreadsheet they could erase. When I got home, I couldn't sleep. I sat on my couch, the one with the springs poking through, staring at the wall. My chest was tight, like a fist was squeezing my heart. I felt this fire inside me, this anger I hadn't let myself feel in a long time. It wasn't just about the clinic. It was about everything. The way the world looked right through me, the way I had to beg for extensions on bills, the way I'd smile at work even when customers snapped at me like I was less than them. I was tired, y'all. Tired of being invisible. Tired of being stepped on. Tired of a world that didn't care if me and my kids made it or not. But mixed in with that anger was something else. Fear. What could I do? If I spoke up, I could lose my job. The hotel wasn't exactly kind to folks who made trouble. I'd seen it before. Co-workers fired for less, their lives unraveling because they dared to open their mouths. I thought about Jada and Malik, how they needed me to keep things steady. If I lost that job, we'd be out on the street. The landlord wasn't playing with that red-inked notice on my table. But then I'd think about the clinic, about all the other families who needed it, about the kids who'd suffer if it was gone. I felt torn in two, part of me screaming to fight, part of me whispering to stay quiet, to keep my head down like I always had. I kept replaying their words in my head, the way they laughed, so casual, like it was just business. I saw their faces, smug and untouchable, and it made my stomach churn. I thought about my mama, how she'd fought for me when I was a kid, how she'd stand up to anyone who tried to disrespect us. She'd always say, "Tanya, don't let nobody make you feel small." But there I was, feeling smaller than ever, wondering if I had the strength to do anything. I wanted to believe I could make a difference, but the world felt so big, so cruel, like it was built to keep people like me in our place. That night, I sat by my kids' beds watching them sleep. Jada had her favorite stuffed bunny tucked under her arm and Malik was sprawled out, his toy truck still in his hand. I thought about the future they deserved, the one I was fighting for every day. And I realized something. Staying silent wasn't just about keeping my job. It was about letting those men decide my kids' worth. It was about letting them decide who got to live and who got to struggle. That thought? It burned me up inside. I felt betrayed, not just by those suits, but by a world that made it so easy for them to do this. A world that didn't see me, didn't see us. I didn't know what I was going to do, y'all. I was scared, angry, heartbroken all at once. I felt like I was standing at the edge of something, like one wrong step could send me falling. But deep down, something was stirring. A spark, a voice, maybe my mama's, maybe my own, telling me I couldn't just let this go. I didn't know how, but I knew I had to do something. Because if I didn't, who would? The next few days, I was a mess. I'd go to work, smile, do my job, but inside, I was falling apart. I kept asking myself, why do they get to decide who matters? I'd look at my kids sleeping, their little chests rising and falling, and feel this ache, like I was letting them down just by existing in a world that didn't see us. Was I crazy for even thinking I could do something? I mean, who'd listen to me? A single mom with no money, no connections, just a mop and a prayer. I'd wake up before dawn, the apartment still dark, the city humming outside like it was alive while I felt half dead. I'd make coffee in this old pot that sputtered like it was as tired as me, and I'd sit at the kitchen table, staring at that red-inked eviction notice. It was like the world was screaming at me to stay in my place, to keep quiet, to accept that this was just how things were. But every time I closed my eyes, I'd hear those suits again, their voices so cold, talking about shutting down the clinic like it was nothing. Like my kids' lives, my neighbors' lives, were just collateral damage in their game of money and power. I started doubting everything, my worth, my strength, even my faith. I'd sit in my car during breaks at the diner, the windows fogged up from the cold, staring at the steering wheel like it held answers. I'd grip it so tight my hands hurt, wondering if I was invisible. Did anyone even care what I heard? I wanted to scream, to let out all the hurt and rage boiling inside me, but who'd hear me? The world didn't stop for people like me. It kept spinning, leaving us behind. I felt so alone, like the weight of the world was on my shoulders, and I wasn't strong enough to carry it. I'd drive home from the hotel late at night, the city lights blurring through my tears. The radio would play gospel sometimes, songs my mama used to sing, and I'd turn it off because it hurt too much. I used to believe in those songs, in the promise of better days. But now, I wasn't so sure. I'd park outside our building, sit there in the dark, and just think about how I'd always tried to do right, worked hard, loved my kids, kept my head down. But what did it get me? A life where I had to fight for scraps, where people could decide my kids' future without even knowing their names. I kept seeing Jada's face in my mind, the way she'd look at me when I tucked her in, like I was her whole world. She'd ask me things like, "Mama, why you always so tired?" And I'd laugh it off, but it broke me. Malik, too. He'd draw me pictures at school, stick figures of us holding hands, and I'd stick them on the fridge. But inside, I'd wonder if I was giving them a life worth drawing. I felt like I was failing them, not because I wasn't trying, but because the world was stacked against us. Those men in that conference room, they didn't know Jada's laugh or Malik's dreams. They didn't know how I'd sit up at night checking Jada's breathing when her asthma acted up, or how I'd hold Malik when he cried for his daddy. They didn't know us, but they had the power to take everything away. I started questioning who I was. Was I just Tanya, the maid? Tanya, the diner server who smiled through the disrespect? Or was there more to me? I remembered being a kid, dreaming of being a nurse, wanting to help people like the nurses at the clinic helped me. But life got in the way. Pregnancy, bills, a man who left when it got too hard. I'd put those dreams in a box, locked it tight, and told myself they didn't matter. But now, with this secret burning a hole in my chest, I wondered if I'd locked away my courage too. Was I crazy for thinking I could stand up to people like that? People with money, with power, with voices that actually got heard? I'd walk through the hotel, pushing my cleaning cart, and feel like a ghost. The guests would brush past me, not even a nod, like I was part of the wallpaper. I'd overhear their conversations, vacations, business deals, lives that felt so far from mine. And I'd think, do they even see me? I'd catch my reflection in the shiny brass elevators, my uniform faded, my eyes heavy, and I'd wonder when I stopped seeing myself. I felt like I was fading, like the world was telling me to shrink, to disappear, to let this go. But then I'd think about my kids, about the clinic, about all the other mamas out there fighting the same fight. And that spark inside me, the one that wanted to scream, wouldn't go out. One night, I went to the church after my shift, just sat in the empty sanctuary. The pews smelled like polished wood and old hymnals, and the stained glass windows glowed faintly from the streetlights outside. I didn't pray, not really. I just sat there staring at the cross, asking questions I didn't have answers for. Why was it always us who had to fight harder? Why did the world make it so easy for some and so hard for others? I thought about my mama, how she'd faced her own battles, racism, poverty, a system that didn't want her to win. She'd always tell me, "Tanya, you don't need their permission to be somebody." But sitting there, I felt like I needed something. Permission, strength, a sign, anything to tell me I wasn't alone in this. I started thinking about the stories I'd heard growing up, about folks who stood up when it wasn't easy. My grandmama used to talk about the civil rights days, how she marched even when it scared her, how she believed in something bigger than herself. I wondered if I had that in me, that kind of fire, or had life worn it out of me. I felt caught between two worlds, the one where I kept quiet, kept my job, kept my kids safe, and the one where I spoke up and risked it all. I was terrified of both choices, y'all. Terrified of staying silent and letting my kids down, terrified of speaking up and losing what little we had. Every time I closed my eyes, I'd see those suits, hear their laughter, feel the weight of their words. I'd think about my neighbors, Miss Lorraine, who took her grandbabies to the clinic every month, Mr. Jackson, who got his diabetes meds there, the young moms like me counting on that place to keep their kids healthy. I felt their stories in my bones like they were part of me, and I kept asking myself, if I don't say something, who will? But then the fear would creep back in, whispering, "Tanya, you're nobody. You're just a mom trying to survive. Let it go." I was at war with myself, y'all. My heart was screaming to fight, but my head was telling me to stay small. I'd look at my kids, at their drawings on the fridge, at the way they trusted me to make things right, and I'd feel this ache so deep it was like my soul was crying. I wanted to be their hero, but I felt so powerless. I was alone, carrying this secret, this truth that could change everything or destroy what little I had. And in that loneliness, I started to wonder if maybe that's what the world wanted, for people like me to feel too small to fight back. But something kept nagging at me, a tiny flicker of hope, like a candle that wouldn't go out. I didn't know what I was going to do, but I knew I couldn't stay like this, trapped in my own head, drowning in my own doubts. Something had to give. Something had to change. And maybe, just maybe, that change had to start with me. Then, something shifted. I was cleaning the penthouse suite one day, still replaying that conversation in my head, when I ran into him. Mr. Carter, this billionaire guest who'd been staying at the hotel for weeks. He was different, you know? Always said, "Good morning," looked me in the eye, asked about my kids. Most folks like him don't even notice you exist, but he did. I don't know why, but that day I just broke. I was wiping down his desk, and I guess he saw my hands shaking. He asked, "You okay, Ms. Tanya?" I don't know what came over me, but I told him. Everything. The secret meeting, the clinic, my kids, my fear. I was terrified, thought he'd laugh or fire me on the spot. But he didn't. He just listened, his face getting serious. He asked me questions, like he cared. And then he said something I'll never forget. Sometimes the smallest voices make the biggest difference. It was like a spark in the dark. I didn't know what he'd do, but for the first time I felt seen. I stood there, rag in hand, the penthouse suite stretching out around me. Marble floors, floor-to-ceiling windows, a view of the city that looked like a postcard. It was the kind of place I'd never belong, not really. The air smelled like fresh linen and money, and I felt so out of place, like I was trespassing just by breathing. But Mr. Carter, he didn't make me feel that way. He was older, maybe in his 50s, with gray at his temples and a suit that probably cost more than my car. But his eyes, they were kind, not cold like the others. He'd been at the hotel for weeks, working on some big project, always carrying a leather briefcase, always polite. He'd ask about Jada's drawings or Malik's toy truck, little things that made me feel human, not just the help. That day, though, I was a wreck. My hands were trembling as I wiped down that desk, my mind stuck on those suits and their secret meeting. I'd been carrying that weight for days, the fear and anger eating me up inside. I'd barely slept, barely eaten, just going through the motions for my kids. When Mr. Carter asked me if I was okay, it was like a dam broke. The words spilled out before I could stop them. The overheard conversation, the plan to shut down the clinic, how it had hurt my kids, my neighbors, everyone I knew. I told him about Jada's asthma, how she'd almost stopped breathing last year, and the clinic saved her. I told him about Malik, how he'd look at me when I came home exhausted, like he was trying to carry my pain. I told him I was scared of speaking up, scared of staying silent, scared of what it meant for my babies. I kept waiting for him to brush me off, to say something polite and walk away. I mean, why would he care? He was a billionaire, living in a world so far from mine. I was just the woman who cleaned his room, who made his bed, who disappeared when he didn't need me. But he didn't walk away. He sat down on the edge of that fancy leather couch, looked me right in the eye, and listened, really listened. He asked me questions. When did I hear it? Who was there? What exactly did they say? His voice was steady, but there was something in his face, like he was carrying a weight of his own. When I finished, I felt exposed, like I'd peeled back my skin and shown him everything raw inside me. I was shaking, waiting for him to tell me I was overreacting, or worse, to call my boss and get me fired. But he just leaned forward, his hands clasped, and said, "Ms. Tanya, what you heard, that's not right. And you telling me? That's brave." Brave. That word hit me like a wave. I didn't feel brave. I felt terrified, small, like I was standing on the edge of a cliff. But the way he said it, the way he looked at me, it was like he saw something in me I'd forgotten was there. Then he said that thing about small voices making a big difference, and it was like someone lit a match in the dark. I didn't know what he meant, not really, but it felt like a lifeline. Like maybe, just maybe, I wasn't as powerless as I thought. I stood there, clutching that rag, my heart pounding, trying to make sense of it. Was he for real? Could I trust him? I'd been burned before, trusting people who didn't care, who saw me as less than. My kid's daddy, my old boss at the corner store, even some of the folks at church, they'd all let me down when it mattered. But Mr. Carter, he was different. Or at least, I wanted to believe he was. He didn't promise me anything, didn't say he'd fix it or make it right. He just said, "Let me think on this, Ms. Tanya. Don't carry it alone." And then he thanked me, like I'd done him a favor. I nodded, mumbled something, and went back to cleaning, my mind spinning. As I pushed my cart out of that suite, the weight of what I'd done hit me. I'd told a billionaire a secret that could get me in trouble, maybe even cost me my job. What if he told someone? What if he was part of their world, not mine? But there was something else too, a tiny spark of hope flickering in my chest, telling me maybe I'd done the right thing. The rest of that day, I moved like I was in a dream. I'd scrub floors, change sheets, but my mind was somewhere else. I kept thinking about Mr. Carter's words, about what he might do, about what I could do. I thought about my mama, how she'd always say, "Tanya, God sends help when you least expect it." Was this it? Was he the help? Or was I setting myself up for another heartbreak? I'd learned the hard way that hope could be dangerous, that it could lift you up just to drop you harder. But that spark wouldn't go out. It kept burning, small but steady, like the candle I'd light when the power went out. When I got home that night, I sat on the couch, the apartment quiet except for the hum of the city outside. Jada and Malik were asleep, their little snores filling the air. I looked at their drawings on the fridge, at the eviction notice still sitting on the table, and I felt that spark grow a little brighter. For the first time in days, I didn't feel so alone. I didn't know what Mr. Carter would do, if anything. I didn't know if I could trust him or if this was just another dead end. But for the first time, I felt like someone had seen me. Not just the maid, not just the single mom, but me. Tanya. The woman who was still fighting, even when she was scared. I started to wonder what could happen if I kept going, if I didn't let fear win. I thought about the clinic, about all the people who needed it, about the kids like mine who deserved a chance. I thought about my grandmama's stories, about how she'd faced fear and kept walking anyway. Maybe this was my moment, my chance to be more than I'd let myself believe. But it was scary, y'all. Scary to think I could matter, scary to think my voice could change something. I didn't know what was coming, but I knew I couldn't go back to the way things were. That spark was growing, and it was leading me somewhere. Somewhere I wasn't sure I was ready for, but somewhere I had to go. A few days later, I'm at the diner, pouring coffee, when I get a call. It's Mr. Carter's assistant asking me to come to the hotel. I'm nervous, thinking I'm in trouble. When I get there, Mr. Carter's in the lobby, looking different. Tired, but intense. He tells me he crashed that secret meeting, showed up uninvited, called them out, and recorded the whole thing. He said he couldn't stop thinking about what I told him, about my kids, about the clinic. He'd been in their world, boardrooms, big deals, but hearing my story, it hit him hard. He said he saw his own mom in me. She was a single mom too, struggled like I did, and he realized he'd been ignoring that part of himself, chasing money instead. He was in tears, y'all. This billionaire crying in front of me, saying he was sorry for not doing more sooner. It was like the world flipped. I wasn't just a maid to him anymore. I was someone who changed him. That moment, it wasn't just about the clinic. It was about realizing my voice mattered, even when I felt invisible. I stood there in that hotel lobby, the marble floors gleaming under the chandeliers, the air thick with the scent of fresh flowers and privilege. People were bustling around, bellhops, guests, suits with their briefcases, but it felt like the world had slowed down, like it was just me and Mr. Carter in that moment. He was sitting on one of those plush velvet chairs, his tie loosened, his eyes red like he hadn't slept. I was still in my diner uniform, my apron stained with coffee, my hair pulled back in a messy bun. I felt so out of place, like I was standing in a world that wasn't mine. But the way he looked at me, the way he spoke, it was like I belonged there, like I was more than the woman who scrubbed floors and poured coffee. He told me how he'd walked into that secret meeting, bold as anything, no invitation, just fire in his chest. He said he couldn't stop thinking about what I'd told him, about Jada's asthma, Malik's fevers, the way the clinic was a lifeline for folks like me. He'd sat in those boardrooms before, made deals, shook hands. But this time, he said, it felt different. He saw my face in his mind, my kids, my story, and it broke something open in him. He told those men they were wrong, that their deal would hurt real people, people with names and lives and dreams. He recorded it all, every word, every excuse they tried to make, and he said he was going to make sure the truth got out. I couldn't believe it, y'all. My hands were shaking, not from fear this time, but from something else, something I hadn't felt in so long I almost didn't recognize it. It was like a weight was lifting, like the air was finally getting into my lungs. I kept thinking about those nights I'd sat in the dark, wondering if I was invisible, if my voice meant anything. And here was this man, this billionaire who could have ignored me, who could have stayed in his world and let mine crumble, telling me I'd changed him. Me, Tanya, the single mom who could barely pay her bills, who felt like she was failing every day. He told me about his mama, how she'd raised him alone in a little apartment not so different from mine. She worked 2 jobs just like me, and he remembered the way she'd come home exhausted but still sing to him, still make him feel like he was enough. He said he'd lost that part of himself, chasing money, building a life so big he forgot where he came from. But when I told him my story, it was like a mirror, showing him who he used to be, who he wanted to be again. His voice cracked when he said it, and I saw tears in his eyes, real tears, not the fake kind you see on TV. This man, who had everything, was crying in front of me, saying he was sorry. Sorry for not doing more, sorry for being part of a world that let people like me slip through the cracks. That moment hit me like a tidal wave. I felt my own eyes burning, my throat tight. I wanted to cry too, but not just from sadness. It was something deeper, something bigger. It was like the world had shifted, like I was seeing myself through his eyes, and for the first time in forever, I didn't feel small. I felt powerful, like my words had reached across this huge gap between my world and his, and made something real happen. I kept thinking about all the times I'd felt invisible, at the diner, at the hotel, in my own life, the customers who snapped at me, the guests who looked right through me, the system that kept me scrambling just to survive. But now someone had seen me, really seen me, and it changed everything. I started thinking about my kids, about Jada and Malik, about the future I wanted for them. I'd always told them to stand up for what's right, to be strong, to never let nobody make them feel less than. But had I been living that? Or had I been letting fear hold me back, letting the world tell me I didn't matter? Standing there, listening to Mr. Carter, I realized something. My voice wasn't just mine. It was my mama's, my grandmama's, all the women who'd fought before me, who'd carried their families through storms. It was the voice of every neighbor who needed that clinic, every kid who deserved a chance. When I spoke up, I wasn't just speaking for me, I was speaking for them. But it wasn't all clear skies, y'all. Even in that moment, part of me was scared. What if this was too good to be true? What if Mr. Carter's words didn't mean anything in the end? I'd trusted before, believed in people who let me down. My kid's daddy, promising he'd stay, then walking out. My old boss, saying I'd get a raise, then firing me when I asked for it. Trust was hard, like a muscle I hadn't used in years. And yet, there was something about Mr. Carter, about the way he looked at me, that made me want to believe, not just in him, but in myself. In the idea that maybe, just maybe, I could be more than I'd let myself be. I thought about my mama, how she'd always say, "Tanya, God don't give you a fight you can't handle." I used to roll my eyes at that, thinking she didn't know how heavy my fights were. But standing there, in that fancy lobby with Mr. Carter's words ringing in my ears, I started to wonder if she was right. Maybe this was my fight, not just for the clinic, but for me, for my kids, for the part of me I'd buried under years of struggle. Maybe speaking up, even when it scared me, was how I'd find my way back to myself. I left the hotel that day feeling different, not fixed, not whole, but like something inside me had cracked open. I walked past the doorman, past the guests in their designer coats, and for once, I didn't feel like I was less than them. I felt like Tanya, the woman who'd spoken a truth that shook a billionaire's world. I didn't know what would happen next, if that recording would change anything, if the clinic would stay open. But I knew one thing. I wasn't invisible anymore. Not to Mr. Carter and not to myself. That spark of hope I'd felt before? It was a fire now, burning bright, telling me I had to keep going, no matter what came next. I went home that night and looked at my kids sleeping, their little faces peaceful in the dim light. I thought about the stories I'd tell them one day, about how their mama stood up, how she fought even when she was scared. I thought about the clinic, about all the people who needed it, and I felt this strength I hadn't known I had. It wasn't loud or flashy. It was quiet, deep, like the roots of a tree that holds strong through a storm. I didn't know what Mr. Carter would do with that recording, or if I'd made a mistake trusting him. But I knew I'd done something real, something that mattered. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was enough. After that, things moved fast. Mr. Carter used his influence to stop the deal. The clinic stayed open, and he even funded a program to make it better. New equipment, more staff. My kids could breathe easier, literally. I didn't get a fairy tale ending, though. I still worked my shifts, still struggled with bills. But something in me changed. I stood a little taller, spoke a little louder. I wasn't invisible anymore, not to myself at least. The hotel staff started treating me different too. Word got around about what I did, and suddenly I wasn't just the maid. I was Tanya, the woman who stood up. Mr. Carter, he kept in touch, sent my kids books and toys, even helped with a scholarship for Jada. But it wasn't about the money. It was about knowing someone saw me, really saw me, and it gave me the courage to see myself. I remember the day I heard the clinic was saved. I was at the diner, wiping down the counter, the smell of burnt toast and cheap coffee hanging in the air. My phone buzzed, and it was a text from Mr. Carter's assistant, short and simple. "The deal's off. Clinic stays." I stood there, rag in hand, staring at the screen, my heart doing this wild dance in my chest. I wanted to cry, laugh, scream, all at once. I slipped into the back room, away from the customers, and just leaned against the wall, letting it sink in. The clinic, that little brick building with the flickering sign, the one that had saved Jada's life, Malik's too. It was safe. Because of me. Because I spoke up. I walked home that evening, the city alive around me, cars honking, streetlights buzzing, kids laughing on the corner. For the first time in forever, I didn't feel like I was just surviving. I felt like I was part of something bigger, like my voice had carved out a space in the world. When I got to the apartment, I opened the door, and there were Jada and Malik sprawled on the living room floor, coloring. Jada looked up, her crayon paused midair, and said, "Mama, you look happy." And I realized she was right. I was. Not the kind of happy you see in movies with big music and bright lights, but a quiet happy, the kind that settles deep in your bones. The clinic didn't just stay open, it got better. Mr. Carter didn't stop at stopping the deal. He poured money into it, like he was making up for lost time. New machines for breathing treatments, more nurses, even a little play area for the kids. I took Jada there a few weeks later for her checkup, and the waiting room was different, brighter, with fresh paint and new chairs. The nurse, Ms. Evelyn, who'd known me since I was a kid, pulled me aside and said, "Tanya, word is you had something to do with this." I just smiled, didn't know what to say. I wasn't used to people seeing me like that, like I was someone who made things happen. But it wasn't all perfect, y'all. Life didn't magically fix itself. I still worked double shifts, still came home with aching feet and an empty bank account. That eviction notice? It didn't disappear. I paid it off, barely. But there was always another bill waiting. The world didn't stop being hard just because I'd done something brave. And that's the truth nobody tells you. Sometimes you fight, you win, but the fight don't stop. You just get stronger for the next round. I'd look at my kids, at their drawings on the fridge, and know I was doing it for them. But I'd also lie awake some nights wondering if it was enough, if I'd ever give them the life I dreamed of. At the hotel, things changed in ways I didn't expect. The other staff, housekeepers, bellhops, even the cooks, they started looking at me different. Not like I was some hero, but like I was one of them, someone who'd stood up when it counted. Maria, who worked the laundry room, she'd nudge me in the break room and say, "Tanya, you wild for that." Even my boss, who used to bark orders without looking at me, started saying my name right, started asking how I was doing. It was small, but it meant something. I wasn't just the maid anymore. I was Tanya, the woman who'd spoken up, the woman who'd made a billionaire listen. Mr. Carter, he didn't fade away either. He'd call sometimes, check in, ask about Jada and Malik. He sent them books, science ones for Jada, who loved stars, and picture books for Malik with trucks and adventures. One day, a letter came in the mail, official looking, and my heart stopped, thinking it was another bill. But it was from a foundation Mr. Carter worked with, offering Jada a scholarship for a summer program, one that could help her get to college someday. I sat there at my wobbly kitchen table, reading that letter over and over, tears dripping onto the paper. It wasn't about the money, though that helped. It was about someone believing in my baby, seeing her the way I did. But the real change, it was inside me. I started carrying myself different, like I'd found a piece of myself I'd lost. I'd look in the mirror and see more than tired eyes in a faded uniform. I'd see Tanya, the woman who'd fought for her kids, for her community, for herself. I started speaking up more, not just about big things, but little ones too. At the diner, when a customer got rude, I'd hold my ground, calm but firm. At the hotel, when my boss tried to pile on extra work, I'd say, I need a break too. It wasn't loud or angry, it was quiet, steady, like I'd finally learned my own worth. I thought about my mama a lot during those days. She'd passed when Jada was little, but I could still hear her voice telling me I was stronger than I knew. I started to believe her. I'd think about my grandmama too, how she'd marched for justice, how she'd faced down fear and kept going. I realized I was carrying their strength, their fire, and passing it on to my kids. I started telling Jada and Malik stories, not just bedtime ones, but real ones, about how their mama stood up, how she fought for what was right. Jada would listen, her eyes wide, and say, Mama, you're like a superhero. And I'd laugh, but inside I'd think, maybe I am, in my own way. The neighborhood felt different too. The clinic wasn't just a building anymore. It was a symbol, proof that we mattered, that our voices could make a difference. I'd see my neighbors there, Miss Lorraine with her grandbabies, Mr. Jackson getting his meds, and they'd nod at me like we shared a secret. We'd fought for this in our own way, and we'd won. Not a big, flashy win, but a real one, the kind that keeps a community breathing. I'd walk past the clinic on my way home, see its lights glowing, and feel this quiet pride, like I'd planted something that'd grow long after I was gone. But it wasn't all easy. I still had doubts, still wondered if I'd done the right thing risking so much. What if Mr. Carter hadn't listened? What if I'd lost my job, my home? I'd look at my kids and feel this pang, knowing how close I'd come to losing everything. But then I'd think about what I'd gained, not just the clinic, but something deeper. I'd found my voice, my strength, my place in the world. I wasn't invisible anymore, not to myself, not to my kids, not to the people around me. I started dreaming again, y'all. Not big, impossible dreams, but real ones. Maybe I'd go back to school, study to be a nurse like I'd wanted as a kid. Maybe I'd teach Jada and Malik that they could be anything, that the world couldn't hold them back. Maybe I'd keep speaking up, keep fighting, not just for me, but for everyone who felt unseen. Mr. Carter's help, the clinic staying open, the scholarship for Jada. It wasn't the end of the story. It was a beginning, a door I'd opened by being brave, by trusting that my voice mattered. I'd sit on my couch some nights, the apartment quiet, the city humming outside, and I'd feel this peace I hadn't known in years. Not because life was perfect, but because I'd faced it, head on, and come out stronger. I'd think about Mr. Carter, about how one conversation, one moment of being seen had changed everything. I'd think about my kids, about the world I wanted for them, and I'd know I was doing my part to build it. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was living, fighting, growing, and that, y'all, was the real victory. Looking back, I wonder, did I do enough? I spoke up, but I risked everything. My job, my kids' stability. Was it worth it? Or was I reckless thinking someone like me could change anything? Some people will never see your worth until someone else does. Maybe what broke me, feeling invisible, powerless, was also what saved me. It pushed me to speak, to fight, to be seen. I sit here now, in my little apartment, the same one with the creaky stairs and the yellow curtains I hung to make it feel like home. It's late, the kids are asleep, and the city's humming outside, that low rumble of life that never stops. I'm at my kitchen table, the one with the wobbly leg, a cup of tea gone cold in my hands. I keep turning this story over in my mind, like a stone I'm trying to see every side of. I keep asking myself, Tanya, was it worth it? I saved the clinic, sure, but I almost lost everything to do it. My heart's still heavy with that question, and I don't know if I'll ever have a clean answer. I think about those days, the ones where I felt like I was disappearing, the nights I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, hearing those suits' voices in my head, their laughter, their casual cruelty. I'd feel so small, like the world was this giant machine, and I was just a cog that didn't fit right. I'd think about Jada and Malik, how they deserved so much more than I could give them, how I was fighting every day just to keep us afloat. And then I'd think about that moment with Mr. Carter, when I spilled my truth, when I let that spark of hope flicker into something real. That moment changed everything, but it also scared me to my core. See, speaking up wasn't just about the clinic, it was about me, about who I was, who I wanted to be for my kids. I'd spent so long feeling invisible, like my voice didn't matter, like I was just a shadow moving through the world. At the diner, I'd smile through the disrespect, pour coffee, nod, keep quiet. At the hotel, I'd push my cleaning cart, head down, blending into the walls. That's what the world taught me, to stay small, to stay safe. But when I heard those men plotting to take away our clinic, something in me snapped. I couldn't stay small anymore. I couldn't let my kids grow up in a world that told them they didn't matter. But here's the thing, y'all. Speaking up came with a cost. I risked my job, my home, the little bit of stability I'd scraped together for Jada and Malik. I think about what could have happened if Mr. Carter hadn't listened, if he'd turned away, or worse, if he'd told my boss I was stirring trouble. I could have lost everything, my paycheck, our apartment, the life I'd built for my kids. I'd lie awake some nights, even after the clinic was saved, imagining that moment when I told him. What if I'd kept quiet? Would we be safer? Would I still be carrying that secret, that weight, like a stone in my chest? Or would I have lost something else? Myself, my fire, the part of me that still believed I could make a difference. I think about my mama, how she'd tell me stories about her own fights, about the times she stood up when it wasn't easy. She'd talk about the marches she went to, the doors she knocked on, the way she'd look people in the eye and demand respect, even when they didn't want to give it. She'd say, Tanya, you don't need their permission to be somebody. I used to think she was fearless, but now I wonder if she was scared too, if she ever lay awake like I did, wondering if she'd done the right thing. I think about my grandmama, who walked those civil rights picket lines, who faced down dogs and hoses and still kept going. Their strength is in me. I know that now, but it doesn't make the questions go away. Was I reckless? Was I selfish, putting my kids' future on the line for a fight I wasn't sure I could win? I look at Jada, at her drawings of stars and flowers, at the way she's starting to talk about college, about being an astronaut or a doctor. I look at Malik, at his toy truck and his big dreams of building things. I want them to know they can fight, that they can stand up, that their voices matter. But I also want them safe, fed, warm. I think about the clinic, about Miss Lorraine's grandbabies, about Mr. Jackson and his meds, about all the families who didn't lose their lifeline because I spoke up. That feels like a win, like something bigger than me. But then I think about the risk, about how close I came to falling, and I wonder if I'd do it again. Maybe that's the real truth. Sometimes the things that break you are the things that make you. Feeling invisible, feeling powerless. It hurt so deep it carved out a space in me. But that space? It's where my strength grew. It's where I found the courage to speak, to trust Mr. Carter, to believe I could be more than the world told me I was. I think about him, about how he saw his mama in me, how my story broke something open in him too. It makes me wonder about the world, about how we're all connected, how one voice, one moment can ripple out and change things. But it also makes me wonder about the cost. Was it worth it? Or was I playing with fire, thinking someone like me could shift the world without getting burned? I walk past the clinic sometimes on my way home from the diner, and I see its lights glowing, hear the hum of people inside, living, healing, fighting. It's still there because of me, because of Mr. Carter, because I took a chance. I feel proud, y'all, but it's a quiet pride mixed with all these questions. I think about the people who still don't see me, the customers who snap, the guests who look through me, the world that keeps spinning like I'm not here. But then I think about the ones who do, my kids, my neighbors, Mr. Carter, myself. I see myself now, clearer than I ever have, and that's something no one can take away. I keep coming back to this idea. Some people will never see your worth until someone else does. Mr. Carter saw me, and it changed him. But more than that, it changed me. It made me see myself, not as the maid, not as the struggling mom, but as Tanya, the woman who fought, who loved, who kept going. But I still wonder, did I do enough? Should I have pushed harder, spoken louder, fought for more? Or was I right to take what I could get, to keep my kids safe while still making a difference? I don't have easy answers, and maybe that's okay. Maybe the questions are part of the fight, part of what keeps us human. I look at my kids sleeping, their little chests rising and falling, and I think about the stories I'll tell them. Not just the ones about superheroes or stars, but the real ones, about their mama, about how she was scared but spoke anyway, about how she fell but got back up. I want them to know they're worth fighting for, that they're worth seeing, that they can change things too. But I also want them to know it's okay to be scared, to doubt, to wonder if you're enough, because that's where the strength comes from. Not from being fearless, but from being afraid and doing it anyway. So I'm sitting here at this wobbly table in this noisy city, with my cold tea and my full heart, and I'm asking myself what it all means. Was I right to risk it all? Or was I lucky it worked out? Was I brave, or was I foolish? I don't know, y'all. But I know I'm still here, still fighting, still loving my kids with everything I've got. And maybe that's enough. Maybe that's the victory. Not a perfect life, but a real one. A life where I know my worth, even when the world tries to tell me otherwise. If you felt this story, I want to hear from you. Leave a comment and tell me how you would have handled it. Would you have risked it all to speak up, or stayed quiet to protect what you had? Would you have trusted Mr. Carter, or kept that secret locked inside? Drop a 1 if this hit you, if it made you feel something deep, if it made you think about your own fights, your own worth. Drop a 0 if you want something different next time so I can make it better for you. And if this story spoke to your heart, if it made you feel seen, hit that subscribe button for Mr. Alex Stories. Let's keep telling these truths together.